The golden royal carriage moved slowly through the streets of London. People stood on both sides, waving and cheering. Many held small flags that now glowed softly, filling the air with a magical light. The city looked different today. Flowers bloomed in bright colors, more beautiful than anyone had seen before. The air felt warm and full of happiness. The sounds of music floated through the streets. Inside the carriage, William looked at Catherine. Her eyes sparkled with gold flecks, her smile calm and full of kindness. He squeezed her hand gently. Catherine smiled back, feeling his love and strength. Neither of them spoke, but they both felt the same thing. Something magical was happening all around them. Ahead of them stood Westminster Abbey. The ancient church looked grand and beautiful, its tall spires reaching for the sky. The bells rang out, their sound soft but strong, calling the people to witness this special day. At the same time, Harrison and Mary arrived at the Abbey with the crown jewels. The St. Edward's crown still glowed softly. The orb and scepter shone like stars. The jewels seemed almost alive, as if they too were ready for the coronation. As Harrison carried the crown into the Abbey, a soft warmth spread through the church. The great stone walls seemed to hum softly, as though the building itself welcomed the new king and queen. Inside, the Abbey was full of people. Nobles, government leaders, and guests from many countries sat quietly. The sunlight poured through the tall stained glass windows, filling the church with colors of red, blue, and gold. Everyone felt the magic in the air. It was not just the beauty of the church or the importance of the day. It was something deeper, something older, a feeling of hope, love, and peace. At last, the golden carriage reached the Abbey doors. The guards opened the doors with great care. William stepped out first, tall and strong in his royal uniform. He held out his hand to Catherine, who stepped down gracefully in her glowing white dress. The crowd outside gasped softly. Many people felt tears in their eyes. William and Catherine looked like they had stepped out of a fairy tale. They were more than just a prince and princess now. They were the future king and queen, ready to serve their people as they walked into the Abbey. The great organ began to play. The music was deep and rich, filling the air with beauty. Step by step, William and Catherine moved down the long aisle. The nobles and guests bowed their heads with respect. The people in the pews felt their hearts full of joy. At the front of the Abbey stood the Archbishop, waiting with a kind smile. The crown, orb, and scepter were placed carefully on the altar, glowing softly. The ceremony began. The Archbishop spoke words of wisdom and hope. He spoke of service, kindness, and the duty of a good ruler. Everyone listened closely. The words seemed to touch their hearts. William knelt before the Archbishop. The moment was deep with meaning. The crown was lifted high as it was placed on William's head. A gentle golden light filled the Abbey. A soft gasp moved through the crowd. Many felt a warm peace in their hearts. Some guests wiped tears from their eyes. It was a moment no one would forget. William stood, now wearing the crown of his ancestors. He looked strong, wise, and kind. Catherine stood beside him, her own eyes shining. Then came her moment. The imperial state crown was placed carefully on Catherine's head. As it touched her, a soft light seemed to surround her. The pearls on her necklace glowed, and once more, a voice seemed to whisper, "Rule with kindness, and the people will love you." William and Catherine stood together, their hands joined. The great bells of the Abbey rang out loudly. Outside, the crowds cheered with joy. The sound of happiness filled the air. Far away, even the flowers in the fields seemed to bloom brighter. The birds sang sweeter songs. The magic of the day had touched everything. In that moment, a new chapter began for England, a chapter of hope, kindness, and love. And the people knew, deep in their hearts, that their new king and queen would serve them well. The soft morning sun rose slowly over London, turning the sky gold. Inside Buckingham Palace, Prince William stood in his private room, looking at his reflection in an old tall mirror. This mirror once belonged to his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth. Today was no normal day. Today, he would become King of England. His hands shook just a little. The royal uniform felt heavy on his shoulders. His heart was beating faster than usual. In the next room, Catherine was getting ready. William could hear soft voices as her helpers prepared her beautiful coronation dress. He smiled to himself. Catherine was probably nervous too. They had waited and prepared for this day for many months, and now it had finally come. It almost did not feel real. Outside the palace, the city was full of life. Crowds were gathering. Along the streets, flags in red, white, and blue waved in the air. Children held pictures of William and Catherine. Some parents set up chairs along the roads, hoping to catch a good view. Street vendors sold tea and warm sandwiches to the happy crowd. Everyone was excited. Some people had even slept outside all night just to see the royal carriage pass by. William walked to the window and looked down at the sea of smiling faces. So many people were looking up at the palace. They believed in him. They trusted him to lead their country with wisdom and kindness. The weight of this trust made his heart beat faster. He could feel the hopes of an entire nation resting on his shoulders. He thought of his father, King Charles, who had spent years teaching him how to be a good king. Being king is not about power. His father had once told him, it is about service. It is about taking care of the people with a kind and wise heart. Just then, there was a gentle knock on the door. His private secretary stepped inside and smiled. Your Royal Highness, the carriage will be ready in 1 hour, the man said softly. William thanked him with a small nod. Just 1 more hour. Before everything would change, on his desk, there was a photograph of him and Catherine on their wedding day. They had looked so young and happy. Now, they were about to become king and queen. Together, they would face their greatest duty. Then, Catherine appeared in the doorway. She looked stunning in her white dress, decorated with tiny diamonds that sparkled like stars. Her hair was beautifully styled under her small tiara. She smiled warmly and asked in her gentle voice, "Are you ready, my love?" William took her hand and smiled back. "As ready as I can be. We'll do this together." Hand in hand, they walked down the grand staircase. Her advisors and guards waited below. Palace staff stood along the walls, bowing respectfully as William and Catherine passed. Some of the older servants had tears in their eyes. They remembered the young prince who used to run and play in these same halls. Outside the grand doors, the golden royal carriage waited. The horses stood perfectly still, dressed for the special occasion. The carriage sparkled in the morning sunlight. As William and Catherine stepped into the carriage, a loud cheer rose from the crowd. Thousands of people clapped and called out their names. The sound filled the air with pure happiness. The carriage began to roll slowly through the gates and onto the streets of London. At the same time, something unusual was happening far across the city, at the Tower of London. Deep inside the secure room where the crown jewels were kept, Master Jeweler Harrison arrived early to prepare the St. Edward's crown for the ceremony. He had done this many times before, but today felt different when he'd unlocked the glass case. He gasped. The crown was glowing softly as if lit from within. The diamonds sparkled brighter than ever. Harrison blinked and rubbed his eyes. He thought he must be tired, but no, the glow remained. It seemed stronger now. The light was gentle, warm, almost alive, curious and amazed. Harrison called his young assistant, Mary. She ran in quickly and stopped in shock. "Sir, the crown, it is glowing," she whispered. Harrison reached out and touched the crown. At once, a warm, tingling feeling spread through him. Then he heard its soft voices like whispers. The voices seemed to come from the crown itself. "The time has come," one voice said. "Long may the new king reign," another voice whispered. Mary heard it too. Her eyes were wide with wonder. Around them, the other jewels began to glow as well. The orb, the scepter, the imperial state crown, all shining with beautiful light. The jewels seemed alive, ready, almost joyful. Harrison lifted the St. Edward's crown. Though made of heavy gold, it felt almost weightless. "We must take them to Westminster Abbey," he said softly. "Something very special is happening." Today, the morning moved on quickly. Inside Buckingham Palace, Catherine stood in her private bedroom. The room was quiet except for the soft voices of her helpers, who were busy getting her ready. An enormous mirror stood in front of her. This mirror had reflected many queens over the past 200 years, but today it looked different. Tiny lights danced across it like little stars. Lady Margaret, Catherine's most trusted helper, carefully brushed her long brown hair. She was styling it so the crown would sit perfectly as Lady Margaret worked. Catherine noticed something. A warm feeling began to spread through her body. It started from the top of her head and flowed all the way to her toes. Lady Margaret smiled kindly. "Your Highness," she whispered, "you look so beautiful today. There is something special about you this morning. I can feel it." Catherine looked at her reflection. She, too, noticed something different. Her usual brown eyes had tiny flecks of gold. They sparkled softly. Her skin glowed, like sunlight on fresh snow. She looked younger, stronger somehow. Or her coronation dress hung nearby. It was a masterpiece, the finest white silk, covered with thousands of tiny pearls and diamonds. But as Catherine looked at it, she gasped softly. The tiny flowers sewn into the dress seemed to move. They swayed gently as if touched by a soft wind. Lady Margaret gasped as well. "My lady, the dress, it is alive," she whispered. With curiosity, Catherine walked closer. The gold threads in the embroidery glowed softly. Silver details sparkled like fresh morning dew. She reached out and touched the fabric. It felt warm and soft beneath her fingers. Lady Margaret helped her into the dress. The moment it touched her skin, Catherine felt a sudden rush of strength and calm. It was as if many voices were softly whispering to her. She felt wise, powerful, and ready. She could now understand things she had never understood before. The worries about becoming queen no longer frightened her. She felt like this was her true purpose. Next, Lady Margaret brought out a pearl necklace. It had once belonged to Queen Elizabeth. The pearls had always been beautiful, but today they seemed to glow from within. As the necklace was fastened around her neck, Catherine heard a soft voice. "Gentle and kind. Rule with kindness, my dear, and the people will love you." It sounded like Queen Elizabeth herself was speaking to her. Lady Margaret stepped back. Catherine's voice was now soft and musical. "I feel ready," she said quietly. "I feel the strength of all the queens before me." The final piece was the diamond tiara. It was placed carefully on her head. The moment it touched her, Catherine felt complete. She was no longer just Catherine, the woman who married Prince William. She was now ready to be Queen of England. At the same time, across the city, Harrison and Mary were carefully preparing the crown jewels for their journey to Westminster Abbey. The St. Edward's glowed softly. The orb and scepter shone brightly. Harrison could feel it in his heart. Today was a day unlike any other. The jewels seemed to know it. They seemed to be full of joy and hope. "Mary," he whispered, "this is not just a coronation. Something very special is happening today. Something magical." Mary nodded, her eyes full of wonder. "Yes, sir, I can feel it too." Meanwhile, the golden royal carriage waited outside the palace doors. The horses stood proudly, perfectly still. They seemed to sense the magic too. William and Catherine, now fully dressed, walked hand in hand toward the carriage. As they stepped outside, a loud cheer rose from the crowd. Thousands of people waved flags and called their names. As the carriage began to move through the streets of London, something incredible happened. The weather had been gray and cold for days. The flowers along the streets were drooping and sad. But as the royal carriage passed by, the flowers suddenly bloomed. Roses turned deep red, brighter than rubies. Daffodils glowed yellow like tiny suns. Purple violets sparkled softly. Even the smallest flowers opened wide, full of life. Children pointed and laughed with joy. "Mama, the flowers are dancing." One little girl shouted. The people were amazed. They had never seen anything like it. The air seemed warmer, full of life and happiness. Even the horses moved gracefully, almost as if dancing. The flags the children waved began to glow softly. Red, white, and blue lights twinkled in the breeze. Musicians along the streets began to play. Their instruments sounded more beautiful than ever before. Violins sang sweet songs. Trumpets played bright notes. Drums beat softly, filling everyone's hearts with joy. It was as if the whole city was alive with magic. Inside the carriage, William held Catherine's hand. Their eyes met. They both smiled, knowing this was a day that no one would ever forget. The bells of Westminster Abbey rang loudly across London. The sounds filled the air with joy and hope. Crowds outside cheered with full hearts. The long wait was over. They now had their new king and queen. Inside the Abbey, William and Catherine stood together at the front. Their crowns glowed softly in the golden light. The Archbishop smiled warmly. His voice echoed through the church as he spoke. Long live the king. Long live the queen. Everyone inside stood and cheered. Their voices rose high, full of happiness. It was a moment that would live in their hearts forever. William looked at Catherine. Her eyes sparkled with gentle strength. In her gaze he saw love, hope, and courage. She smiled softly back at him. Without words, they both knew this was the start of their greatest journey. After the ceremony, the great doors of the Abbey opened. Again, the bright sunlight poured inside. Outside, thousands of people waited eagerly. Many had tears in their eyes. Parents held their children close, wanting them to remember this magical day. The royal guard stepped forward. The music of trumpets filled the air. William and Catherine walked out, hand in hand. The sight of them brought loud cheers from the crowd. People waved their flags high as they stepped into their golden carriage once again. Something even more amazing began to happen. The sky, which had been cloudy just hours before, cleared suddenly. The clouds parted. A bright, gentle sunlight bathed the city. The flowers along the streets bloomed even brighter, filling the air with sweet scents. Birds began to sing high above, their songs pure and joyful. People gasped in wonder. "Mama!" one little girl shouted. "It's magic! The whole city is alive." Indeed, it seemed so. The flags glowed softly. The music in the air sounded sweeter, clearer. The people felt a deep happiness in their hearts. Many smiled through tears. It was as if the city itself celebrated the new king and queen. Inside the carriage, William looked out at the cheering people. He felt their love, their hopes. The weight of his crown reminded him of the great duty ahead. But in his heart, he felt calm. He was ready to serve. Catherine, beside him, also felt the deep connection to the people. She held William's hand tightly. Together, they would face all that lay ahead. As the carriage rolled through the streets, the crowds followed. The royal guards on horseback led the way, their armor shining in the sunlight. The people cheered, waved, and called out with joy. Suddenly, something even more strange and beautiful happened. The bells of every church in London began to ring. One after another, their sounds filled the sky, blending into a grand melody. People stopped and listened. The sounds seemed to speak to their hearts, a song of unity, hope, and new beginnings. From the smallest street to the grandest square, London felt alive with magic. The people felt closer to each other, closer to their new king and queen. William noticed it too. He leaned closer to Catherine and whispered, "Do you feel it? The city, the people. It is as if we are all connected." Catherine nodded, her eyes full of emotion. "Yes, my love. Today's not just history. Today is hope." As the royal carriage approached Buckingham Palace, the gates opened wide. The crowds followed, filling the streets outside the palace. The balcony above the grand entrance waited. William and Catherine stepped out of the carriage with grace. They climbed the palace steps. The heavy doors opened. Inside, the palace staff waited with warm smiles and respectful bows. Some older servants had tears in their eyes, remembering William as a little boy. In a few moments, the couple stood on the famous balcony. The crowd below cheered wildly. The sound was like waves of happiness rolling through the air. William raised his hand in greeting. Catherine stood proudly beside him, her eyes shining with kindness. The people loved them. They could feel it in the cheers, in the smiles, in the waving flags. Then, a small moment of pure joy. One little child in the crowd called out, "We love you, King William." "We love you, Queen Catherine." William smiled warmly and waved to the child. In that simple moment, hearts across the kingdom felt full. The people knew their king and queen loved them too. Above the palace, doves flew in circles, white against the blue sky. It was a sign of peace and hope for the future. And so, a new chapter began. William and Catherine side by side, ready to serve with love, kindness, and wisdom. The people of England believed in them, and across the land, from the smallest village to the great cities, the feeling of that magical day would never be forgotten.